Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of the Wild User Interviews podcast with me, ABB. Today I've got with me Eric Weiner, CTO and Managing Director at Pagoda. Prior to joining Pagoda, Eric has over a decade of crypto experience from early Gemini to Nifty Gateway and maybe more. We'll find out. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, really glad to be here. It's taken a while to get this thing booked up. Long time overdue, so happy to be here.
It is not uncommon to have to follow up people that I know are very busy to get them to book. Or maybe uncommon about this one is that you booked a couple of days ahead of a major announcement. So I'm really curious to know what the mindset was going into the booking or the podcast. Are you coming in with a big reveal, setting everything on fire, revealing something super bullish and alpha? What are we getting?
I've got no major news to break to you exclusively, but as we were gearing up to make a major announcement at Pagoda that I'm sure we'll cover, I popped into my head that considering the whole point of decentralizing Pagoda was to engage more with the near community, what better way to do that than to start engaging more with the near community and have this long overdue conversation?
Flawless reasoning so far. I like it. A quick intro for those that may not be aware as we head into the conversation. A few days ago, there was an announcement of several entities being spun out on Pagoda, ceasing services over the next 6 months. So we will cover those in more detail as we go. I was just thinking of that because you joined Pagoda in September 2023.
Yep.
As Chief Technical Officer and Managing Director, this was probably your legacy in some ways. So I'm curious, I don't know if you've announced which one of these entities you'll be joining afterwards or...
Still working that through. We're working through the details of that. I'm definitely staying in one of those entities and going to continue, hopefully making a positive impact on the community if I can. Definitely, I did not come into Pagoda with any intention to be its last CEO. That wasn't what I had planned on signing up for. And it's something that I don't particularly take much pride in. I'm not in the context of the broader ecosystem. I think in the long term, these moves are going to be good. In the short term, for myself, for the 64 people working at Pagoda today, it's a lot of turmoil. It's a lot of change. It's not going to be a particularly fun process. There already hasn't been a fun process. So it's pretty bittersweet, honestly. It's not something that I've spent the last year both getting up to speed on getting up to speed on Pagoda, understanding everything we do, weathering through a number of changes in both the Near ecosystem at large and Pagoda's role and responsibilities within that ecosystem. And it's only very recently that that it's come together that this was the right time to wind it down entirely, or spin out pieces and then wind down the rest of it entirely.
This is why we have no structure to the podcast. If I zoom out long enough, I'll be up there with Elon's satellites. It makes sense. I don't know if Ilya ever told you, but we had a bit of a wagyu. We had a bit of a not so friendly beef back in May. And he's like, look, if you really want to know what Pagoda is doing, have Eric on your podcast. Don't go around speculating shit and saying shit. And I was like, good, let's get Eric on the podcast. So that was the origins to get you on board. But yeah, I'm aware that any organization of any size has what you're working on, which may change every day, plus the market, plus 1,000 external forces. Looking forward to unpacking all of those. Before we get started, people may be asking, who the fuck is Eric Weiner? I was looking at your background and you were all the way back at Bridgewaters in 2008.
Yeah.
Gemini very early on, 2013. Nifty Gateway, 2021 to 2023. So maybe just give us a quick overview of that journey, and I'll ask some questions along the way of things that I find a little bit interesting, if we were to put things in a historical context.
Sure. I guess my crypto journey started around 2014. I was doing some I'd worked for a hedge fund for a while, got me up to speed on how markets work and how the world of finance works, but it got to a point where it was really hard to drag myself out of bed in the morning and say, today I'm going to help take a large pile of money and turn it into a slightly larger pile of money. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to find a lot of passion for that, even if the work itself was very interesting. Did some freelance work for a while, and through some set of mutual connections, met the Winklevoss twins, who were at the time big investors in Bitcoin and had invested in a number of crypto companies, most of which they felt had either failed or they felt had been not superly well managed, including, I believe, some of the founders of those having gone to jail at some point. At the same time, this is right after the Mt. Gox crash and the big hack there. And so they're looking and saying, look, like, we believe in this technology. We believe in the future of, at the time, really just Bitcoin, because there really wasn't much of an altcoin or other coin market out there. But nobody's doing it right. People who are building exchanges either aren't really qualified to run markets or handle people's money. So let's build something new in New York City, where people know how to manage money, where people know how markets work, where even we've got, at the time, pretty friendly regulators who were technology forward and trying to make the stuff work. So the idea was to build Gemini as the first fully regulated, licensed Bitcoin exchange with people in New York who, from NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, Jane Street, companies that knew how money can be managed and how markets work. At the time, the whole fintech startup scene was actually pretty nascent. Coinbase was around, but, and I think they probably won't take much offense at this. Like, it was a few years after that Coinbase got serious about how their underlying structures were built. At the time, I don't know if I would have trusted it with my crypto or with my cash. And even, it was just a very different world of fintech back then. I was the first engineer there and the VP of engineering, and helped grow that team up from just me hacking on a prototype up to about 125 people. And we built Gemini. We built Gemini Dollar, which was the first and still one of the only actually regulated fiat-backed stable coins out there. I'm really proud of what we've done there. It was a number of years of just trying to wed the best of Web3 with something that we hope would be familiar or not off-putting to people who were either institutional investors in other asset classes or retail users who were, intrigued, but maybe a little scared. And one of the biggest lessons I learned from that experience was how not scared people ended up being once they finally learned about the value and the potential of crypto. In a sense, one of the things I regret looking back on that time was how much we tried to make, whether it was our APIs or our interface or our marketing material, how we tried to conform to, okay, it's just like commodities. It's just like foreign exchange trading. We'll adopt these, we'll shoehorn in some of these concepts, visual or market related concepts that existing traders might have been familiar with. It turns out, if you just throw it all out there, it's compelling enough that people were willing to dive in.
I actually really like that period in time because I bought my first Bitcoin in 2013. I was at uni. I read this book called The Dark Web by Jamie Bartlett. I was studying law at the time, and I just couldn't believe that there was this world just in the dark net where people were doing stuff. And I was shocked, but I also really got the value of Bitcoin immediately because I grew up in Venezuela. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is the real deal. Buying Bitcoin in 2013, it was hard. This must have been before Mt. Gox hack, because I had the option of wiring money from Australia to Japan, which was expensive in and of itself, and then waiting for a few days and sending the reference code. So I ended up depositing cash at a Bank of Queensland. I still get weird feelings when I walk past the branch in the Melbourne CBD and the cashier is like, you're 100% getting scammed. Do you know who you're depositing the money to? And I was like, yeah, just go. And a few days later, they credited. And the platforms at the time, if I had to describe them, were literally cypherpunks and weird people that owned Bitcoin and just wanted to make it easier to exchange it literally amongst themselves. Totally. There wasn't really much of a product vibe or design or the vision that it would grow to 100 million, 1,000 users. They knew Bitcoin would grow. It was just a very makeshift platform. Some of the early days literally were like Craigslist, like you put up the ad and somebody messages you and just do it in the most peer-to-peer sense.
good old local Bitcoins and all that good stuff.
Now, what I'm really curious about is I saw it from the Australian underground and the Venezuelan hyperinflation crisis. So I guess that I came at it from the technology being very counter-cultural and that potential to challenge the system. I'm really curious, where did the Twinklevoss twins came at it from? Because, yeah, sure, they got hyperfucked with Facebook. Who knows what sort of issues that would trigger psychologically on the best of humans. But wanting to bring that professionalism, that product, that basically the American execution standards to this new industry so early on, it's an incredible blend of maybe they weren't suffering the same issues that people that Bitcoin would have been most suited for at the time, Turkey, Argentina, Venezuela, whatever. But they were blending, you know what I'm saying? Like that merge of the countercultural technology with operational excellence.
Yeah. It's a good question. And I can't necessarily speak for Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, but I can speak for
Bring
where
them on
our
the pod.
viewpoints. Yeah, let's get them in there. I could speak for like where my viewpoint, I certainly in those early stages was very heavily influenced by them. They really introduced me to the crypto world more than anything else. And so I think there's also, while the US has been a relatively stable place to live and work for the last hundreds of years, thankfully, American culture also has this deeply embedded sense that tyranny is just around the corner. And I think especially when you've gotten screwed over by Facebook, you feel like it's even more around the corner. And so there's definitely a feeling like it's the same feeling there. Yeah.
Because if I had to draw some parallels, I think this is just coming to me. I see a parallel between Ilya leaving Facebook early with a glimpse of the influence that AI is going to have in the future, and the Winklevoss parting ways with Facebook very early, but well aware of where social media was going and the influence that it could have in the world.
Famously, they sued Zuckerberg and went through this whole thing and turned into a really interesting movie, but they took the settlement in Facebook stock, not cash. Look, you screwed us, but this is still going somewhere. And that's made them a lot of money, but I think is also like a good sense of the future.
Usually and I never watched the movie, but usually the legal case and the settlement, people tend to see them through the money issue. Hey, motherfucker, like you screwed us over of probably one of the world's largest fortunes. But I'm wondering how much of being 10 years ahead in when the world would be going around centralized control of basically everything. I don't know if it's because I untapped myself from Facebook in 2017 and I tried to use Instagram at the minimum, and I'm mostly on Elon's crazy freelance now. But there was a point in time where I was like, Facebook is more powerful than half the world's governments. Easy. Like in terms of influence and anyway. So I wonder if they were able to see that early. And that's why Bitcoin was such a strong value proposition to them. They were like, yeah, the world's not going to be as it is now. We may be pretty good now, but.
Yeah. And I definitely also see, like, having worked for the Winklevoss trends and worked for Ilya, I definitely see those parallels of they're both people who have a pretty good innate sense of where, at least where they think the future is going, and where so far that has proven out to be basically correct. And they're just like talking about the world 10 years in the future. And you have to say, okay, hold on a second. You seem pretty sure about this. Can you draw me that line? Cause you got to walk me back. And so whether that's, okay, I see the future of social media and how important it is, and just need to figure out the steps to get there. Or I see the future of crypto and how important that is, and just need to find the steps to get there. Or I see the future of AI and how important it is. I just need to find the steps to get there. Often for most of us, the challenge is seeing where the future is going. And I think for them, the challenge is like, what do you do about it?
But usually to see the future, you need pretty strong psychedelics. Or it usually comes from like lived experience, which is very hard to convey because how can you communicate every minute of your life up until that point? Ilya can say, yeah, Google or cunts, whatever. The Winklevoss can say, yeah, like you can see the company that they took away from us, but there's a lot that adds up, even in unconscious ways that they just push you in different directions. Which, by the way, I wanted to ask you, you're a very humble man. You didn't just work for any hedge fund. You work for Bridgewater with Ray Dalio, which coincidentally, 15 years later, is now also publishing books, very concerned about these global macro trends, including inflation. I'm curious, as a very junior employee at the time, how close were you to him, or was there like an influence? What was the culture like at the company? Did some of that insurrectionist vibe, was it in you back in the day, or that was just pure coincidence?
Thing that they definitely imbued in me was to take any idea, no matter how wacky it sounds in its face or how different it is from what you're used to, and evaluate it objectively and really give it its fair shake. It was a good place to start my professional career after graduating college, because it really does, like, they operate, anybody can say anything, and if it makes sense, then it'll get its fair shake. At the time, Bridgewater was a pretty insular organization. They had a very considered unique company culture that they kept a little bit close at hand. And they tried to make sure that their voice was very well heard within the hedge fund client community. So if you were a manager of a pension fund, you were getting Bridgewater's newsletter, whether or not you were a client, and learning about their market research and but it was only very recently, towards the end of my tenure there, and since then, that they've decided to make, Ray Dalio has decided he wanted to be more of a public figure and put both the firm and his market insights and insights about how organizations and people work more out there in the world. I mentioned earlier that it was hard to just grow a pile of money. And I had mentioned that to some of the leadership at Bridgewater during my tenure there. And so when they were forming these teams to say, look, let's build more technology systems around not how markets work, but around how people work and how the organization should work, I was invited to be a part of that team. So we did some really cool stuff, just analyzing data about employees, which run some pretty interesting sociological experiments when you're paying people to work at a place, and data about candidates. Okay, now we thought, here's a job. We got these candidates. We evaluated on this criteria. We hired, some people worked, some people didn't. What does that tell us about our hiring criteria? What does that tell us about the personality of people we're hiring? Like, okay, there's 6 billion people in the world. If I know what kind of person I'm looking for, why am I just looking at my job candidates? Why am I not looking for the best people for this job out of all 6 billion? And how do I find those people? Some really interesting stuff that they've then expanded out into, even, I think, spin out companies. I think it was like the principals organization that helps to take these same sort of concepts and publishing books, putting out software tools for other organizations to use. Now I'm some of the stuff I'm like an adherent to, and most of it I actually end up not being. But I think the lessons of thinking in that way, analytically, not just about technology, about processes and about people, I think has really helped guide my openness to the crypto revolution and to everything, and to decentralization and everything we're doing here.
I was actually really grateful. I stalked your LinkedIn before the podcast. You probably saw 90 notifications that I saw your profile. I hate that LinkedIn does that. And I came across the principled tools that I heard about them in a podcast years ago. And I made the note, oh, I should go and check it out, because it makes sense that if you can understand each team member's personality, their style of work, when you focus on the individuals and the team, you can get better teams, and that culture of radical honesty and writing everything down. It's interesting that they talk about it now, although they've been doing it for a while. And I've always wondered, how would an organization go about implementing that? Most of the work that I do, I'm a bit of a loner. Maybe because nobody has analyzed my personality. Hey, who can work with me? But I'm curious, 15 years later, did you psychoanalyze everyone at Pagoda? Did you determine which type of Asperger's everyone has? Were there any valuable lessons there to try to smoothen things out? Or
yeah, and I'm not sure how much I've formalized that. I think the biggest difference between the corporate culture that was very intentionally curated at Bridgewater, and the one that I've either helped to grow or maintain at places I've worked since then, is that I think at Bridgewater, they say there is a best type of person who is fit for this job or for this company. It doesn't say anything about any of their personal characteristics, about their national origin, race, gender, age, nothing like that infuse it. But there is a personality that works best for this job, or a skill set that works best, or even like a value set that works best for certain jobs or for the company. And we can teach the skills you need if you've got the right values and you've got the right personality. And that's a really interesting way of thinking about it, but it also creates an intentional monoculture. It means that you are looking for people who think in a specific way that you want them to think. And that means that you need to go search far and wide for people who meet that criteria. And if you don't meet that criteria, even if they determine that after you come in, you're fired. Okay. You think differently, and that's not what we're looking for here. And I've found, frankly, just pragmatically, working with a more diverse group of people who think differently has been beneficial. It's certainly harder, because like when you talk to people who are like, you vibe well, you can just trade off things. And when you start working with people who just come at every problem from an angle that you would have never thought of, or the way they want to push their career forward is very different from the way that you were thinking about pushing a career forward, or the things they value in the world is different from the things you value in the world, that can be challenging, especially just as a manager of people at an organization. But I think it can really help. It can help create really new ideas. It can help an organization be stronger and help a team be stronger. And it can also help teach you things about how your value set and your personality that you would have never really encountered before. Which is a little bit of a rambling way to say I have no idea what parts of me I've taken from that experience or from other people I've met, but I've been making a very intentional decision since my time at that hedge fund to expose myself to other ways of thinking.
The biggest difference, if I had to peek at something, it's very different to focus on a task with a clear outcome, more money, less money, than to create products, because the product still has a human on the other end. So it definitely requires much more. Yeah, I can see why the viewpoint diversity and the skills diversity is much more needed. Which, interestingly enough, it also links with some of the conversations we've had about Pagoda over time. I had the chief product officer, I think June or May 2023, and we talked a little bit about the challenges of running the product side of things on an engineering-heavy organization where the product is aimed at engineers. Because the engineers tell you, what the fuck do you know about product? This product is aimed at people like me, so I'll just keep doing what I think is best. I don't know if you can comment on that challenge between engineering-led organizations that have a named product aimed at engineers.
Yeah. And I think Alex mentioned that on that episode. It's like the best products for engineers, the engineers using them don't notice that they're using a product. There's one of the real big challenges of that is often the people who are the product management is like a lot about empathy. Do I understand what you need? Do I understand what you want? Do I understand what will make you happy? Software engineers have a range of skills along that axis. Some of them are not empathetic to user concerns. Some of them are very empathetic to user concerns, and everywhere in between. But some of the ones that are best at being empathetic to user concerns are also the best, like on the ground engineers. And so often the best people that I would want to be product managers for products for builders are also the people I cannot spare to be product managers for builders, because they're also the best builders. That's the biggest challenge I have with building products for engineers. It's just, there are some people like it is some of the best people in the product space aren't actually in the product space. And so you're trying to find, what do we teach? At the end of the day, the best way to go about that is you take a more generic, more nimble product team that can adapt to the needs of any user base and say, okay, go learn about engineers and builders and what they need, and we'll work from there. And I think that's the team that Alex built up and that I inherited. And it's a fantastic team. And many of them are available to be hired now. And I encourage you, if you're anybody listening, if you're looking for great product managers or designers, please get in touch and I can.
And if
give
you
some
do
great
hire them
references.
from the podcast, give me a referral fee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it happens in every industry. I recall when I was at uni, they were saying, like, look, the reason why working in law is so miserable is because the lawyers that are good get promoted, but they were good at law and now they manage others, but they're not really good at managing people. Happens in schools. The best teachers become managers and principals and no longer teaching kids. There's a paradox between being really good at something, but as you go up the seniority rank, you actually get away from it. So I wonder, this is probably where the AI and the future of work kicks in. But I'm even seeing it in community. The best people that we have doing great work are busy doing the work and don't really have the time to be communicating it. I guess that's why we have the podcast, to try to give the opportunity to people, hey, 2 hours of a day, ideally one too many communication. But yeah, it's definitely a struggle how to scale community. Because I'll say it, I've been saying it forever, but I'll say it again. There was a big gap in crypto in general, but in the Near ecosystem for sure, between the community, mostly unemployed people having fun, chasing memes and whatever, shitting on each other and governance. Who knows what they were doing, really? But there was a big gap between that crazy fun party that was not fun at some point and the people building stuff. And sometimes I could see the duality between, there's a lot of energy here and like really a lot of talent and cool things being shipped or built. And on this side, people were frustrated. They don't know what's going on. They don't see any progress. And I was like, okay, so we got to communicate more from this side, but also the mission that I'm on now, just curate a little bit on the other side. It's obviously fine if you want to go, run around naked, shooting animals and printing shit coins or whatever, but we need to have a community made up of people that enjoy the technology, that have a shared vision, that can collaborate towards a goal, as open-ended as a community may be.
Yeah. Without forcing it, because that would be more part of the problem. And I try to, every once in a while, like even 10 seconds ago, like the thought floats into my head phrased as, okay, how can Near Foundation harness the power of this community and these enthusiasts? But that's not a healthy way of thinking about it, because it breeds control and resentment. It's how do you create the atmosphere such that enthusiasts and a broader community are well aligned with the thing that the full-time employed go into the office builders are also aligned to.
I'm 100% in agreement with you. I personally feel that the current, I hate to use the word, narrative is the correct one, is the one that has always been and should have always been. Like I've got amongst my many tabs, I've got the Near AI tab. Just a static page. It's got I guess it's like a manifesto, like a letter. It's literally called Near AI Master Plan. And
Yep.
I'm going to record a video saying we need a fucking code. Every single person in Near should know this message by heart and try to invite people that it resonates with. And that's a key thing. We can't force people. If the message is insipid and no one likes it, clearly not going to succeed. And we've tried at times. We manipulate people a little bit with the grants, or they pulled out official talking points or whatever. That never works. What I find interesting is that it's very hard for some people to try to tease apart centralization from centralization from centralization. So what do I mean? If NF does everything, okay, it's centralized. But if NF identifies, say, 10 individuals from the community, they're all doing their own thing in their own way, but they have that sort of energy, they've got some sort of ability to execute. I do think it's okay to delegate out to smaller teams to then run in their own direction. I see it as a big need now on the community side, but it may also be incidentally the perfect segue for that transition period or the next stage of evolution that Pagoda is going into? Or actually, maybe before we jump into that, we'll hold that thought. I'm really curious. What was your time at Nifty Gateway? Because you go from hedge fund, like big boy hedge fund, to one of the biggest crypto startups in Web3, at least the most professional one, to the NFT bonanza. Yeah, what was that like? Because I would imagine there were very different environments.
Yes and no. Okay, so Nifty Gateway, a little history here. Nifty Gateway was founded in 2017, maybe 2018, 2017, by another set of identical twins, Duncan and Griffin Cockfoster. And
what are the chances?
yeah. And so they started as a kind of like a PayPal for NFTs. If you're making a site that sold NFTs or built NFTs, CryptoKitties at the time was basically CryptoKitties, CryptoPunks were the only ones. You could put the Nifty Gateway widget on your site, and then people could come and pay and buy that NFT with just a credit card and a username and password instead of having to download MetaMask, which at the time was at a pretty nascent state. And okay, download MetaMask, install some creepy stuff into your browser, go sign up for an exchange, go through KYC, wire in some funds, wait 5 days, buy some ETH, figure out how to transfer it from your crypto exchange account to your MetaMask, go hit a really weird looking approve button, because again, this is early MetaMask, and then hope that everything worked out. Oh my God. Like the onboarding experience for any NFT was miserable. It still is, but it was definitely at the time. And so the idea was to build a one-click, okay, it's like buying something online. It's e-commerce. NFTs are just digital things. I actually never liked the term. I think they turn it into a category when it's really just like stuff, but online, which doesn't really need a term in the first place. So they built this thing and it was cool. But it was, and at that point, like the one set of twins met the other set of twins. They realized that they were both trying to do the same thing. Let's take this concept of everything you can do with crypto, put a very familiar face over it, and help expose it to millions more people. So Gemini acquired Nifty Gateway when it was just a 2-person founder shop. And it was run and so Nifty Gateway was a subsidiary of Gemini as they went through the process of hiring a few more people, but also realizing that business was constrained by the natural growth of the NFT business, which at the time had volumes of $1,000. And so the best way to move the prospect of NFTs forward was to move it forward themselves. So they shut down that product, pivoted to essentially a premium online only art gallery, which is what they relaunched at in March 2020, which was a bad time for the world at large, but a really coincidentally good time to put art galleries online, and really experienced absolutely runaway growth from there. So that team grew pretty rapidly, but also the sales went from, okay, being really excited about $1,000 of sales to being like, okay, now it's $1 million, now it's 10 million. Oh God, we whipped together this platform in a month or two. And while Duncan and Griffin are fantastic founders, they're not really great engineers. And so the platform was getting botted and getting crashing on every drop. And so this team that was working under me at Gemini was really struggling to handle the scale. And at that point in my role, I was just like in meetings 10 hours a day. And sometimes that's nice. And sometimes I was getting bored of it. I was eager to get more hands-on. So what ended up happening is I just dropped myself two layers down the org chart at Gemini to go work for the other set of twins instead of the original set of twins, and try to help that organization get a handle on its scale and hire more and grow from there. So it was definitely a different feel, like right back to startup hypergrowth phase that Gemini had been in a few years back. But Nifty Gateway was always trying to do the same thing for digital art that Gemini had been trying to do for crypto in the first place.
That makes a lot more sense. The twins part, I'm not going to comment. All I hope is that Ilya has a lost twin somewhere. Because as far as pattern matching goes, that is immediate success. But I didn't know that Gemini acquired them. The things that I really like are, first, having that vision first to remove the friction to make payments work. Because it requires a lot of humility that, to be honest, not many people have even to this day. to look at the existing crypto landscape and the journeys and the products and say, hey, this is all shit. Are we aligned in a vision and a mission? Yes. Do we like what we see right now? No. And that's fine as long as we build towards improving it. So that desire and dedication to improving the payments for NFTs so far ahead of its time, pretty cool. The other thing that is impressive to me is the awareness. It's common sense, but once again, it's more the willingness to take on the challenge to grow the market. If you have a great product and you realize there is no market for it, then you have almost like a side quest, which becomes the main quest. And looking back, pretty easy to tell, but you guys did a great job. Like, I had no idea about the origins of Nifty Gateway, whatever that means. But when you go to the website now, it looks amazing. Like, it definitely conveys that premium product. The branding is smooth. Everything seems to be very thought out to the last detail. It has that level of excellence that you would associate with a Web2 product or like a well-funded, well-structured team. So yeah, congratulations. I guess you can take all the credit.
Thanks. Credit goes to all the twins involved. I also learned like there was upsides to that approach and then there were downsides. And I think it again comes back to, it turns out that you can build this facade, this familiar facade over Web3. You can say, look, this stuff is not that hard to understand. It's not that hard to use. We put a familiar face on it. We put familiar people in front of you. These are artists. These are UX interactions. Here's how, and we can hook you into this broader, amazing world of Web3. And where I think a lot of where I would have done things differently, both in Gemini and Nifty Gateway going back, is that it ended up being this gateway drug. And then people just moved on to the hard stuff. Okay, great. Oh, wow. Digital art. It's unique. It's separated. Oh, there's a certain number of editions that makes sense to me. I can sign up with a username and password and credit card. Hey, how does this stuff work? Oh, there's really crypto under the hood. How do I use that? Oh, I guess I go over to OpenSea. And now you gained a customer for them instead of for yourself.
It is hilarious to me that the only people that discount the theory or the fact really of the gateway drug setup are young drug consumers. It definitely happens. And once again, like I'm making notes here because I can see how the pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And there's a lot of concepts here that like to draw parallels as we enter into the new era. A lot of people dismiss the gateway drug now in a serious way. I have seen some great examples of shit that anyone could have built that served as gateway drugs, big ones for ecosystems. And I'm often thinking how we could do the same on our end. The two examples are Frentech for Base.
Mm-hmm.
I told people, even if Frentech is a piece of shit, they accomplished their mission. There was probably some engineers like yourself and someone with a half-shaved head and product, whatever. They said, what are our key performance indicators? Get people to bridge Ethereum to Base. Once I have Base in their MetaMask and they've got some money there just sign transactions, we've won. They won me. Once I had some money in there, I was a Base user. And the rest of the story unfolds. Pump.fun on Solana, very similar story. I'm sure there are some analytics somewhere. There'll be case studies on this for years to come, but I wonder how many degenerates started the journey, not just in Solana, but in Web3 through Pump.fun. Oh, they all lost money. Of course they did. It's a casino. That's beyond the point. The objective of Pump.fun was never for people to make money. It was to get people through the door, have some fun, and then give them some other drug. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit too cynical and simplistic, but it works.
Yeah, look, it's a little bit of fun goes a long way. A little bit of viral sensation goes a long way. And like with every hype cycle, whether it's in the broader crypto ecosystem or the broader tech ecosystem, or even just for a particular product like Frentech or Pump.fun, like it's fun. It's fun enough. It's engaging enough that people come in, and a lot of people come in who are just there for the hype, or they don't really get it, and they're just trying to make a quick buck, and they lose their shirt and they disappear. But there are a lot of people who get brought in for maybe not the right reasons, but they get brought into this thing just to have fun and explore it. And then they understand what it is. And they're like, oh, wow, hey, I actually do like base, or I do Solana, or I say hot. Hot is an example of this. And then I think they've been doing a good job of running the same playbook. And you hear about hot, you're like screwing around on Telegram and okay, cool. Some people are just trying to claim hot and see what they can get out of that. And then some people are like, oh, hey, this protocol seems interesting. And now even if the hype cycle fades, those people stay and create a stronger ecosystem at the end of the day.
And that's where, obviously, I said in a very loose terms that anyone could have built it. But in those cases, it's where you see the good product element, because it's not just a simple product. It's also trying to build in those elements that also separate it from a Web 2 product. So for instance, how do you explain to people, sure, you bought a shitcoin, it's worth 0, but it is uniquely and truly yours. No one can take it away from you. And even for me, I mean, in 2017, 2018, all the concepts around AMMs. What? Anyone can deploy their own exchange? Anyone can create a liquidity pool? Anyone can trade, and you can see the prices move, and we've got this like really ruthless free market economics playing out. Isn't it crazy to think that the American election may be decided between more of the lefty type that want whatever price controls, whatever they want at any given day, and some people that unwillingly have learned by getting destroyed and pumped at fun, more supply, bad. Concentration, bad. My bag's good. There's some values and some properties of crypto built in somewhere there that I think if you can convey, maybe it's a very small percentage, but I self-identify, they trigger the curiosity, and then you move on to the next one and the next one.
Yeah, but it's actually, I don't think it's that small a percentage. So many of my conversations with the normies out there about what I do and what crypto is and whatever, everything that's going on there come down to this. Oh, I don't understand. Like, I just you're telling me I'm going to put like some coins into this account and then it's mine, or talk about a lending protocol. Okay, I'm going to give some coins to these people and they're just going to give it to other people and they're going to give me a return. How does that work? And I was like, okay, but is your money not in a bank? And have you ever figured out how that works? Same freaking thing, just more transparent. Same thing goes for collectibles, NFTs, like everything that we're doing in the crypto world is mostly parallels to things that you can or could do in the non-crypto world, made more transparent and obvious. My desk is filled, like you can't see it, but in front of me is a whole bunch of worthless crap. I love worthless crap. My desk is littered with it. In the physical world, I never think twice about the fact that it's worthless. Yeah, okay, this stuff is, hey, I bought one of those useless AI gadgets. This is probably worthless.
Isn't the rabbit?
Yeah.
Dude, keep it. That shit will one day be like museum worthy, because I don't think many people are buying it because it's so bad. But it's also the beginning. It's like the origin story. Your kids will be proud of you one day.
It's got a nice little bouncing rabbit logo. It's cool. It's very orange. But okay, financially, this thing is not particularly worth it. And it's not traded on a crypto market, so I can't go look it up exactly how worthless it is. And that's the only difference between this and an NFT.
If you look at the worthlessness of it, yeah, perhaps. You know what happened to me earlier today, stalking you on LinkedIn? I went to one of the URLs that you provided. I believe it was some of the blockchain education courses. And I believe either the URL is outdated or the company is no longer around. But it's a good example of something that you did or owned a few years ago. It's just no longer there. Few people go through it, but I feel it more personally because I had a few very failed startups in 2017, 2018, 20, whatever. When you unplug, like when you stop paying for the server, when you unplug the login, like people's entire presence and the product just vanishes. Like it's a really weird concept that if a founder burns out, they whatever get divorced, whatever, the everything that you own can be gone. And some countries experience it through your bank just going bankrupt. Some people experience it through the government taking away your house and your chickens and whatever. But it's it's one of those primitives that maybe it's hard to explain because it's often at the extremes that you see the need, but you don't have to reach the extremes to build cool stuff that we couldn't do before. And that's where more and more primitives keep stacking up. To be honest, crypto is a different beast than when I started in 2013. I often explain it as Bitcoin was against central banks, I guess more right. And Ethereum was more against, I guess, like corporate, what's it called? When it's not capitalism, it's plutarchy, whatever.
Like oligarchies and...
Yeah. So it's more lefty in the sense that now the people own the platform. And we've got airdrops for people that never really earned shit, but whatever, we'll give them half the company. The next iteration is wilder because then we start introducing things like AI, which make us revise ownership, but it's different because in this case, people are contributing their data, presumably. And anyway, we'll keep unpacking those layers later on. But yeah, I think of those primitives just stacking are creating a new world, well and truly.
Yeah. It's going to be a really, especially, I wish I knew what the future of AI would hold, but I know I refuse to underestimate it. And so I imagine we are rapidly building these primitives, and we're going to need them soon to figure out what the future holds.
Rabbit. That is as open-minded and less assuming as it can possibly be. But now, we're about 53 minutes in and multiple sets of twins. I need to know, how does the transition from Nifty Gateway, because you seem to be on a bit of a roller coaster, right? Hedge fund to corporate, then startup grows, then you go back to startup, and Pagoda, I'll let you define it, but it seems to be like some sort of a weird hybrid. So how do you make that shift from Nifty Gateway, which would have been a lot of fun, I would imagine, weird NFT people cashed up? How do you move on to Pagoda?
At the end of the day, when I first took the plunge into the world of, at the time, Bitcoin, it was, hey, this technology is, blockchains are such a compelling way for unrelated entities to interact with each other, for people to transfer money without having to trust each other, for governments to interact, for businesses to interact, whether that's monetarily or with their data or whatever. It's just fundamentally better than the systems that existed before, which are treaties, consortiums, central entities that you have to trust and hope they won't screw you over. That I think it's, generally speaking, when something comes along that's so much strictly better than what came before it, it is inevitable on some grand time frame that this will be adopted. Okay, so I'm relatively confident that in 50 years, the world's financial transactions will at some point be underpinned by some sort of blockchain technology. Now, or that like a lot of user interactions, a lot of online interactions in general will be underpinned by some sort of blockchain technology. Okay, 50 years is a long time. What can I do to make that process go better? What can I do to accelerate that time frame? In 2014, the way I could make that process go better, the way I could accelerate that time frame was to try to help crypto grow up. Put on a suit, go in front of the New York regulators, go in front of Wall Street, and make it part of things. Did wear a suit occasionally. We had people.
The dark days.
Mostly I wore this. Okay. What I was talking about before I sidetracked myself was like, at the time, what crypto needed was like a regulated licensed exchange that would appeal to Wall Street. But what I think crypto needs now is consumer applications built on blockchains that don't scream, I am a Web3 app at you. And I think that's what Near was built for from the get-go and has always been best at. And I think that's what Pagoda has always been trying to make happen for the world. And so I saw Pagoda as like my next best shot at making that happen for the world. A transition I still believe is inevitable, but I do want to help wherever I can. And so that's what I think, that's what really drew me into Near more than anything else.
We're very aligned on that. I definitely want to see more consumer applications myself. I actually have an ever-growing list of like small experiments and silly things that can probably get us closer to that. I think it's pretty crazy to think we're going to go from tutorials on a website to multi-million users. But I'm curious, like, how did you hear about Near? When did come across you for the first time? Because there's several blockchains out there, and I guess just one way or another, they're all working towards the same goal.
Yeah, I'm going to give a pretty lame answer here. I've been aware of Near for a while. The whiteboard series helped teach me about the people involved in Near and Near itself. We had explored, when I was at Gemini, we explored integrating Near at the time, overwhelmed with requests and didn't end up doing it at the time. But at the end of the day, Pagoda was hiring. They got a recruiter reached out to me. I piqued my interest and I learned more from there.
Fair enough. See, the recruiter earned the commission fee. That's what we're talking about.
There we go. Yeah.
Awesome. And you come in September 2023. I remember because we met at that ecosystem roundtable in Lisbon, but you were like brand new.
Yeah.
And I think I invited you on the pod and you're like, I literally started this week. I can't tell you anything yet.
Yeah. A little bit overwhelming from the get-go there, but especially since there's so many. I showed up in my first week and I just got inundated with not terminology, but with entity names and organization names. And I'd be like, okay, how does this work? And they'd be like, oh, NDC got built out to do that. Sorry, what? Can we start from scratch? Can somebody draw me a map? Somebody eventually did draw me a map. I think Web3 plug, but
nice.
But yeah, it took a lot to understand. It's an ecosystem. It took a lot for me to get my head around who is on what and who interacts with who in what way and whether those things are important. And now when I talk to people who are new to the Near ecosystem, I am trying, but honestly often failing to not throw them into the same deep end and help people understand the overall makeup of the ecosystem and how people interact as best I can.
It is a challenge of decentralized ecosystems. I love that I'm increasingly picking up words that technical people use that I know what they mean. I'm just not technical. There's dependencies, but it's like organizational dependencies. I'll never forget in December, I think it was 2021, very early days. This was Eric Troutman era, so 2 foundation CEOs back. I worked with him very briefly to do like an ecosystem onboarding mapping. I was basically just talking to a bunch of people. And they gave us access to the analytics, to the Near website. There was an external team. And the only person that had access to all these analytics tools had been shifted to Pagoda. I think it was a Near Inc. transition or whatever. She joins the meeting and she's, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I don't work for them anymore. And I was like, you can't expect to just leave with all the analytics. Like, even if you do like a handover or something, but it was this really weird tension of my manager is somebody else. I've got a shitload of work to do. What are we doing here? And we later figure it out. I don't want to make it sound hostile or anything, but it was just a very small example that even as an outsider, I could figure out, yeah, look, there's some challenges here. So I guess we're 1 hour in, so fuck it, let's just go all in. Who is ultimately, I don't want to say responsible, but when we try to understand the forces behind the transition to Pagoda, should we think about them as maybe negative forces, as in, fuck it, this shit's going downhill, break it up, or as positive forces, be like, hey, we could actually improve way better. Like, my influence is going to be to push towards change. It's not like I tried and shit's going downhill and somebody else broke it up, but you like low key restructured it in the best way that you see fit. Which way would it lean?
I'd say it's a
and
little
we don't have
of
to talk
both,
about
honestly.
it in those terms.
No, it's fine. I think it's a little bit of both. I think ultimately, like, every cent that Pagoda spends was coming from the Near Foundation treasury. There was nothing, it's not, I said 99% of everything that Pagoda spent on salaries, on infrastructure was coming from the Near Foundation treasury. And so the Near Foundation Council manages the Near Foundation treasury. And they were looking at the situation and saying, okay, the negative side, Pagoda is an expensive organization. This treasury has a mission to be used to develop the Near ecosystem, and they're certainly working on that stuff. So is it money well spent? It's towards the right goal, sure. Is it money spent in the most efficient way possible? Probably not. Is it money being spent on the thing that we want to spend it on versus, okay, if we really want to make this investment in the AI ecosystem in order to prevent this AI catastrophe we see coming on, like how should we reallocate? I mean, these are all good things to think about. And then also on the kind of the negative side of things, having Pagoda's existence as this closely affiliated, subsidized entity within the sort of the near foundation verse has made it, has in addition to perceived or actual instances of being anti-competitive to the rest of the community, has also kept Pagoda from forcing itself to go collect revenue and get financial market validation for the things it's been building. It's something that I was told on my first day, and it took me too long to come to terms with and to really turn that ship around. But okay, if Pagoda were self-sustaining, then as a business, then we don't think we'd be at this place where we're decentralizing and spinning it out at the moment. And I don't think, and its situation didn't give it the pressures to go do that and just make that happen. So you've got those forces at work. And at the same time, okay, the Pagoda situation isn't necessarily coming across as the best use of treasury funds towards the best thing that we could find. And also here's an opportunity to foster a more decentralized ecosystem of smaller independent startups, possibly doing the exact same freaking things in a way that's going to get more market validation from users, more market validation from possibly external venture capitalists, so that your foundation, the treasury, isn't being the injector of money. You get more people bought into the ecosystem, even with their cash, and just more ideas brewing more naturally. Again, even if it's the same people and the same products and the same experiments happening, I think it creates a stronger ecosystem if those are done a few more arm's length away from the near foundation and its treasury. So yeah, a little bit of Pagoda did not seem like a experiment that was succeeding to the extent that it would make sense. And I certainly take a decent amount of blame for that. I had my opportunity to prove it, and I didn't do that. And then to some extent, given that, like, how can we help create the best ecosystem we can out of what comes from Pagoda? And that's where we say, okay, here are some pieces we would like to create more independent spinouts from. Here's some things we think should be RFPs. And we're trying to set up the people at Pagoda as best as possible to remain in the new ecosystem, whether that's outplacement to other ecosystem entities or creating their own startups. Take something that we built or had experimented with or we're already running and go do it. Talk to our legal counsel, talk to our accounting team, talk to our startup incubation team, and let's figure it out together.
I personally think it works really well. Maybe a recent example would be Alten spinning out from Foundation to do Nuffle.
Mm-hmm.
He talks so much about waffles, and now I confuse it to whatever, the waffle guy. And maybe they're a particularly charismatic and energetic set of founders, but there's such a drastic difference between having a near DA label and then things being funneled into the foundation where yellow people are employees, and the pressure is different. That sense of ownership, even just the excitement to grow it, and this is your baby, and you can be fully supported and still inevitably part of the ecosystem. But it's a very interesting mindset shift. I can't say that I've held a job for too long, but I often see that difference. Like I prefer to be on the outside to feel that pressure to always try to find where to add more value or what's interesting and where the activity is. Because I can see how just a regular chunky paycheck can make people be a little bit more maybe complacent. Yeah, complacent is the right word because it's never coming from a bad place. And technically, no one is at fault if you're just doing what you're meant to be doing. But maybe it's harder to expect a larger organization to move in an agile way.
Yeah, it's almost more the size it's like the size and the mission more than it is like how you get paid. I think you can be you can be an employee of a startup drawing a salary and put your all into it and help that thing succeed. But when Pagoda's mission is like, Pagoda's usually had a mission and had a direction, but if that mission or direction wasn't working as well as we want, we just change it. And everybody knew that we would just change it. Let's build near.org into this, the concept from 2023 of the boss platform. We'll build near.org into this social network for builders and users in which you can create and launch and use applications built on Near. Still like the concept. I came in at the tail end of that proving ground for it, but there was always this concept. I could tell from the time I started Pagoda, there was always this understanding, an accurate understanding that and if this doesn't work out, we'll just do something else. Whereas at a startup that is trying to do a thing, we will do this thing and we got to make it succeed, or else there isn't a startup here anymore. Or we pivot, but we do that as a thing of last resort when we have another good idea. We don't just move on to the next best side option we have, which is just the situation that Pagoda had been in for a bit. And it worked, but it's not healthy for the ecosystem.
Pagoda had, I want to stomp on a dead horse, but Pagoda had many dualities that, once again, I'm actually happy to see them resolve themselves. One of them was that it was a founder-led company. Technically, Ilya was the head of Pagoda, but also Pagoda was ancillary to the ecosystem. Ilya was doing a lot of more public-facing things and a wider set of things, perhaps. I don't know. I'm under the impression that his current role now as the head of NF probably suits him better, at least in terms of having that more ecosystem-wide coordination. So once again, I can only imagine that even if something may not be working internally, you're like, am I really the one to say it? This is a founder-led company. We're doing what we're meant to be doing. And if not, somebody here further up probably should say something. That's a weird tension that I sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I think I've always thought this through my career. You find great visionary people and you follow their lead. It doesn't mean literally do everything they ever say. It means you provide feedback and have conversations with them. But so many of the great startup success stories and just success stories in the world are about letting great visionaries cook. I wholeheartedly believe that. And I came into the Near ecosystem with the assumption that the best way for the Near ecosystem to succeed is to let Ilya cook. And it has been, I think this has gone as a sort of wavered over the course of just the year I've been around. But I think if I look at the Ilya of today, of August 2024, he is cooking through decentralization and through making a stronger ecosystem around Near, instead of, the way that I don't think he's saying the way I want to make my vision happen is to hire 65 engineers and have them do everything I say. And I think that's a healthy evolution and a correct one. But it has been sucky for Pagoda.
Yeah, it's been a lot of changes. It's been for several parts of the ecosystem, but given that things will carry on in various shapes or forms, some of them still to be defined, I think this could be a great opportunity for me to try to understand what a lot of these things actually are. So I've got the post regarding the future Pagoda services, and I thought maybe we could go one by one, a bit of a rapid fire round, just to give a quick overview, what it is, how it works. Maybe if that specific category had some particular challenges, I did the note on the near.org RPC, for example. And if that area is looking for a potential team to take it over, maybe what type of profile would you like to see on a team? If there's already being some context being made in that sense, basically whatever is relevant to each one of these categories. How does that sound?
This will be pretty early. I don't know how long do you usually take between this conversation and posting it online?
I was aiming for next Sunday, but
cool.
I can delay as much as needed, or...
No worries. It's just that I was excited to come on this podcast while we're still trying to figure everything out, but I'll warn you that we're still trying to figure everything out.
Sometimes it helps if you put the known unknowns out there. People that may be able to contribute towards the known side may manifest themselves. Some people are cynical and may say that you're being a motherfucker putting pressure on others publicly. I don't think so. I think we'll work on this together.
Yeah. And if I only was going to talk to people once the plans have all reached perfection, then we're just never going to have the conversation. So I may as well just go for it.
I think it's being managed beautifully, by the way. The Near Foundation blog has a positive spin on the two new entities, which are indeed good for decentralization. Maybe some of the technicalities around the Pagoda services further, like one layer out in the Pagoda post. But yeah, in general, if the historical criticism is maybe some things have not been communicated, especially around contributors and opportunities, well, when would be a better time to start than now?
Yeah, and that's been our focus. Like this process, it's been a relatively small team trying to work on this communication and what these plans entail. And mostly we've been trying to see how can we help the community, the broader new community, and the people at Pagoda and at Near Foundation understand what we're doing and why, but also how can we take care of the people in the best way possible to create and then hopefully a stronger Near community. And then keeping stuff running and figuring out how that's going to happen. As long as we get the must-dos done today, like we can figure that out. And that's really like the work there starts mostly today.
Keeping things running is a big one, but near.org RPC.
Right. Okay. So Pagoda operates rpc.mainnet.near.org, which is the most popular RPC service that is relied on by tons of Near applications. It is scalable. It is fast. It is low error rate. It's a really good service. And has a number of, but the problems with it used to be technical, but like fantastic team behind it that has done a lot of great work helping it scale as the demands on it have increased orders of magnitude in the last year. So I cannot speak highly enough for Nesto and Rob and the team that helps run that thing. And so one thing that's going to be very challenging about current Pagoda and then the future is that, as I said, Pagoda is basically 64-ish people. And Ernesto is the main RPC full-time person, but there's a supporting cast of dozens back there that are working on various bits and pieces of it, whether that's the read RPC service that helps serve requests at scale faster, or the team at the protocol team that's helping make archive nodes and split storage. There's just so much that goes into it that it's hard to say the one team. And as we decompose into smaller independent entities, you have to say, okay, it's this team of 3 versus this team of 1 with 12 part-time people behind it. That's the talent there. But as I was saying, Pagoda RPC has scaled well and it's gotten more reliable. But it also means that if you need an RPC service, you may as well use this really nice free one instead of paying for an alternative commercial one, which means that the alternative commercial ones haven't been doing well in the market. And so it's not good for decentralization and it's not overall good for the long-term health of the ecosystem and the businesses that want to be a part of the ecosystem to have a really scalable, really high quality, really totally subsidized by the Near Foundation service out there like this. So
let's pretend for a moment, it's not too far from reality, but let's pretend for a moment that I'm 5. The RPC is how the blockchain talks to the real world, right?
It's how your application, whether it's your wallet or the application you're using, talks to the blockchain. So
when I click sign a transaction, whatever is staking with Metapool, it is the RPC that makes the call to the blockchain.
It's your link between the application and the blockchain.
And the difference between paid and free, who would pay for the commercial ones? Is it the application or the user?
Usually the application pays for it, and they should be able to do that by making revenue from their users or whatever their business model is.
Is it expensive? Would it be a factor that a builder getting started today, would it change their scenario planning? Going from the free one to the paid one, maybe earlier than expected or something?
It really does, but even commercial RPC providers in the Ethereum world, like one of the biggest ones are called Alchemy and Infura. And there's also a number that support Near. They usually have a free tier. So you can use it for free. You can get yourself started. You can build your app. You can use your wallet. It's only when you really hit scale that you have to start paying it. And it's well understood in many other crypto ecosystems, many other L1s and L2s that okay, I can get started for free, but my business plan, my business model has to take into account the cost of this service as my application scales up or as my wallet gets more usage. In Near, we've seen evidence that people are assuming that they can put as much traffic towards this service as they want without incurring a cost, which is, it's really an implicit subsidy from the Near Foundation treasury towards ecosystem applications, which is in some sense a good thing because it makes it easier and more economical to launch your application or your wallet on Near. But in another sense, again, it's keeping a sustainable ecosystem from forming around it by crowding out competition from that marketplace.
Two things. Would it make sense to think of ways to shift the incentive from the money going to Pagoda? I guess there's a bill at the end of the month that Pagoda gives the foundation or something, for there being a program to subsidize the projects directly. So for instance, I fork Hot because I don't like them, lol. And I start putting a gazillion transactions through. The foundation can be, oh, you've got a cool project. We can subsidize you up to whatever, X amount. And they give me the money and I pay for it. Would that be perhaps a better way to track where the subsidies are going and if it's having any real impact on the metrics that matter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so that we've done a couple examples of that in the past. I think it's almost like UBI, like universal basic income. If you want to support somebody, it's better to give them unrestricted cash so that they can decide where best to spend that money than to subsidize a service and have that service offer it at a discounted or free rate, because then you're just forcing decisions upon that recipient. And so, yeah, I think it's a much better path. There's pros and cons to everything. And you also don't necessarily want the Near Foundation itself picking winners and losers with applications and wallet get subsidized in certain ways. Something we're dealing with on the infrastructure committee about how to do the best thing for the ecosystem as possible when deciding how to distribute funds or subsidies or credits around. But in general speaking, you're right. Yeah.
And from an ecosystem perspective, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Pagoda has been running mostly at cost. So if it were to shift to a model where the foundation or whichever entity subsidizes RPC for growing startups through the startup, I would assume it's logical and fair that the startups choose who they pay, but also that provider makes a profit. So wouldn't that be net positive for Pagoda, assuming that they continue to provide services, maybe more competition now, let's say the market share drops or whatever, 30, 40%. But wouldn't that allow you to have healthier profit margins as well?
Yeah. So right now, Pagoda is not charging for this service. So it's operated at cost, but that cost is fully subsidized and billed to the foundation. There is an opportunity here for somebody, including people who are at Pagoda right now, could take all of the infrastructure that Pagoda's built and use it to run a commercial RPC service. And it would be set a profit margin. It could be a healthy one. It's one of the things that I hope will happen. But there's also other people doing it. There are companies that offer RPC services across a number of chains that either have a Near offering or and starting Near offering. There are decentralized RPC services. And the way that generally works is because an RPC service is really just like a server you have to hit. It's the default way of doing it is it's centralized. It's not, it's an availability thing more than it is a security thing. I'm relying on this service, and if it goes down, then my application goes down. But it could also maybe, if I say, okay, what's the balance on this account? It could tell me the wrong number. I'm really only just trusting it to tell me the right number. And unless you're running your own blockchain nodes. A decentralized RPC service is more of a router. It says, okay, you give me a request. What is the balance on this account? I've got a few or dozens or hundreds of providers behind the scenes, and I'll send your request over to there and pay them appropriately on a per request basis. And you get back your result. Maybe it's even double checked. So there's some of those out there. And then there's near specific ones, Fast Near, run by Eugene and Vlad, they're running an RPC service, and there could be more in the future. So it's one piece of core blockchain infrastructure. But we do want Pagoda to get out of that. Pagoda to get out of that, and for any remaining official looking RPC service on near.org to be just a little free tier, like demoware. And if you need to use it for real, for a commercial application at scale, if you're hot, or if you're the fork of hot, you're gonna have to go pay somebody. Maybe you can get a grant or subsidy or credits to do it, but
Well, you better do it fast, friend, because if Kamala wins, I want price caps on RPCs. Sure. Okay, that's interesting. But on a serious note, I know that the RPCs have improved a lot over time. There has been waves of unprecedented demand, sweat, hot. Is it possible that somebody could argue that it was maybe the subsidized model that didn't allow for adjusting fast enough that may have led for the RPCs not keeping up? Like, I'm thinking, if we had moved the subsidies earlier, could we have kept up with those spikes in demand better? Because there may have been more people just trying to, maximize profit by serving the market.
yeah, maybe we hit this in the course of the last year within Pagoda. We kept on hitting this thing where Pagoda has long planned to start putting a billing and metering system around RPC above a certain tier, just to make those subsidies more explicit, or to put them directly or make it a paid service and start covering its costs. Not a new idea. It's been batted around for Pagoda for years, but the last year has been a number of decisions of, oh crap, you should just gone up 5x. I can decide to spend, like the team can decide to spend their time building that billing and metering system, or can spend that time trying to handle the 5x increase in traffic. And for the good of the ecosystem, we always chose option 2. Better to spend our time trying to handle that increase and make and keep things rolling and keep applications working than to get that project done. And we didn't have the time to get around to it.
If it was just Ernesto, yeah, we may have been expecting too much. We need to clone him with AI developer or something.
Pretty good idea.
But what we're going to do, because I'm mindful of your time and we've got a few things to tackle, maybe we'll just bundle all the critical services. So we've got Nearlake, BigQuery public dataset, Node snapshots, and state sync. Would those 4, do you envision them going 4 separate ways? Could they potentially be bundled, like the same team just picking up the whole stack? Is there synergy between them? Are there any challenges that you guys face in running them that people should be aware, or opportunities, like the commercial opportunity for the RPC that we just mentioned?
Yeah, great question. I think there are kind of 2 categories of those. One of them is there's services that application developers or end users use. And another category is services that are like helpful for validators or people running near nodes. For that latter category, it's not great Near is a decentralized blockchain. Anybody can run a near core node without having to trust any data from any centralized party, can get that thing stood up and validating blocks on the block. Cool. But it takes a while and it's hard to do. And if you rely on a centralized service to get your node stood up, it can get stood up a lot faster and cheaper. And it's not terrible, but it's not great. And that's what some of these things like node snapshots and state sync are for. They're centralized services that make the decentralized service easier to run. So the protocol team is looking to make these things less useful, less needed in the future, so that you're not inclined to rely on an S3 buckets or data on the Amazon cloud in order to get your core blockchain data. Better to download it from other peers on the decentralized network itself. But for all the services, go ahead.
I think at some point I heard it may have been Ethereum or some blockchain, maybe Bitcoin, that you could actually buy. They basically just send you a hard drive, some terabytes, just to be, get the node to sync. Otherwise, it would take a ridiculous amount of time. And I was like, oh God.
Yeah. And you trust what's on the hard drive, I hope. So
probably not good if it's a crypto and they assume you have money. There's definitely some shit in there. Okay, so the latter two potentially could be dealt with on a software improvement.
Hopefully, but that'll take some time.
And those two, the software improvement would fall under the near one Pervy protocol
exactly
team.
Right. Yep.
Serpo and Wang, maybe guess 69, who knows?
Oh, yeah. But regardless of those categories, the process from here is that the infrastructure committee, which is 5 leads of various organizations in the ecosystem, will put out an RFP for continued operation of these services. So defining generally what the service is, what we need from you, SLAs, so service level agreements that you need to hit, and soliciting proposals from ecosystem entities to take on those services for grants or investments, or we're open to a number of different funding structures. And those proposals have to include takeover plan. Okay, how would I and when would I take over those services from Pagoda so that I can operate them myself? I point that out because I think that's the biggest difference between what has happened in the past with Pagoda decentralized stuff like wallet.near.org or like AstroDAO. Often they were pushed out of Pagoda rather than pulled in by other willing ecosystem entities. And it's been the Pagoda engineers responsible for the transition out plan. But you got to have a willing and engaged recipient who is trying to bring it in. I think that would result in more success if it's the recipient responsible for the transition. But anyway, so that process of RFPs, soliciting proposals, is evaluating those proposals, selecting them, and then executing those transition plans. That's kicking that off basically now. And so there's a long way to go there. There's more than just what's on this sheet. There's a number of little smaller things. And so the infrastructure committee is basically trying to navigate all that over the next few weeks to months.
As you're saying it, I'm thinking, I'm trying to visualize the difference between being or becoming the operator and the maintainer of the actual open source repository and the core code, and simply being an operator. Like, for instance, say the RPC is open source. Sure, I can go and run the code, but to become the Pagoda, you have to become the person that actually owns it as a piece of infrastructure and evolves it over time. Would that be the correct analogy? Because some people may be confused here. Let's say people are like, yeah, Pagoda will be gone. Opportunities for me. Everything is open source. I can go and run it. It's still different to simply use the open source to run a service than to maintain it. Like, how would you, am I overcomplicating things?
Only a little. I think the thing that anybody can use this, like almost everything Pagoda has and has ever built is open source, and anybody can go build and operate their own services to do these things. The thing that infrastructure committee is trying to get bids on is operating basically services at URLs people are already using. So there are people running services that rely on the Near Lake. And all the code behind Near Lake is open source. If you wanted to run your competitors to Near Lake, you can just take that code and run it and do it. But nobody would know where to go to get your data. Near Lake is a place to get a lot of blockchain data. And so right now, everybody goes to this specific URL currently operated by Pagoda. If we were to turn off that URL, a lot of stuff would break. A lot of stuff all over the ecosystem would stop working. So the RFP and the proposal and the operators, who's going to operate that URL so that stuff that is already relying on it doesn't break? And maybe that proposal says, hey, I'm going to announce that I'm going to shut that down in 12 months and move over to this other service, but it's still got to be a plan and not a hard cut.
I get it. So if I were to launch the Drain the Lake, it's still, yeah, okay, I get it. I will be linking to the document, the original one, and to the, what's it called, the administration committee? No, the infrastructure committee.
Infrastructure committee, yeah.
Yeah, so people that are interested can follow up and keep an eye out when those RFPs come out. Perhaps the one that will be more interesting or more joyful, chain abstraction services. We already mentioned the positive precedent of Alton and his team spinning out to do data availability. I love having that dedicated team really pushing the BD, the relationships with other ecosystems, owning the brand, having the profit motive, raising money independently as well. Can we expect something similar for chain signatures? I see here 3 categories: chain signatures, multi-gas relayer, and fast auth. Are they going to be bundled? Are they separate? How should people think of those? And where would be the opportunity if there is one,
Yeah.
or for what kind of people?
So that's the idea here. These 3 products have all been, the engineering has been done by Pagoda, where a lot of the business development, launch planning, and go to market and sales has been done by some of the staff from Proximity Labs. And then some of the marketing and like market positioning and events management has been done by people from Near Foundation. And it's working. And I think we had a successful launch of chain signatures on mainnet just last week, but it's these sort of cross-organization boundaries and trying to work together across these different organizations that each have their own goals. And that situation also was the same sort of thing for Near DA. And so bringing people from different organizations together and say, look, we are a smaller, cohesive, focused organization with a shared goal, I think has been great for Nuffle Labs. And so we're running that same playbook for these chain abstraction related or multi-chain interaction related products so that we can get integrated with everything necessary to build the product, get it to developers, get it to builders, get it to end users, and get people using it effectively. I'm really excited about that. It also helps in the same way that Nuffle Labs is pushing forward the concept of Near as a part of the modular blockchain stack. This new spinout will be responsible, or at least really leading the charge for pushing Near as a chain abstraction, as a place for chain abstraction, because the Near Foundation has really taken up the mantle of pushing forward Near as an AI ecosystem. That way we have been talking, what is Near for God, since Near's come about, but like, rather than have a marketing budget trying to be split 3 ways to tell people what Near is, it's really all these 4 different things. Have different organizations saying, Near is a very flexible piece of technology. It is fine to have Nuffle Labs saying Near is great for this, and this new spinout saying Near is great for chain abstraction, and the Near Foundation saying Near is great for AI. These are not incompatible, and I think it's best to have different voices saying these things.
And this may be an example of how it pulls both ways in it being the best thing to do and it just being the outcome of some challenges. The way that I see it, and let me know if I'm somewhere in the vicinity of the correct path, it makes sense if we assume that up until now has been a mostly in-house engineering efforts, and now that it's hit mainnet, it just changes. Like the focus now is to get people building on it. So it would make sense to now regroup the troops and get people. I would almost see it as a product organization. You make it very product centric so that you do whatever you have to do so that offering grows. And look, this is before your time. And I think measures have already been taken a long time ago. But I remember during NearCon, it would have been 1 week in the job. I asked someone like, does Pagoda have metrics for the products? Like how many people are using FastAuth? Like why don't we see FastAuth anywhere in the ecosystem? I talked to engineers, don't really know much about it. And the engineer was like, yeah, nah, like we've got technical specs, but once it's there, like we just move on to whatever the next thing in engineering is. So I think that in that sense, it's going to be great to have a dedicated organization doing whatever it takes for the success of chain signatures.
Totally. And there's always a balance to hit between like a vision of what you think the world needs and KPI driven evolution. The world is littered with startups or companies that are following the data every single step of the way and reaching mediocrity. And then also the world is littered with companies that say, I have an idea and I don't care what the world says about it. I'm just going to do it and nobody cares. And finding that balance is something that you have to do with a cross-functional team. But I'm excited to see for us to do that.
Before you said the M word, I was going to say the Eric era, which was very early on. He was very analytical. He wanted to see data. And my weird analogy about being in a call that I should not have been in with analytics people that were no longer in the organization, it points out at the time we should have had more hypotheses and experiments and that vision. I think the Marie era is great because it was regulatory uncertainty and she navigated that in a very savvy way. And we got some large corporates that kept the blockchain alive. I think everyone's had the role. And that's why I'm excited to see that literally everything in the ecosystem is being assessed, restructured, re-engineered. Some things may not work, some things are painful, but we are seeing that retuning of things.
I think the ecosystem has a bright future ahead. I just have no idea what that future is going to entail. And the Near Foundation and the Near Foundation Council is learning to let go of control over what that future entails too.
I mean,
I think it's healthy.
It's hard. I asked Chiocchi, when would he consider that his job as Near was done? It was a great response. Very ambitious and very idealistic. If I had to reflect on it, I've come to terms with the fact that the ecosystem is growing beyond what I understood initially and probably beyond what I can do. I would be content with communicating enough to attract the people that take it to the next stage. And fuck it, hopefully I own some Near and I can die from an overdose in Ireland or something. Like, it's interesting to see where do we come in, do the best we can, and hand over. So as someone that managed a lot of people looking for a new home, looking for opportunities, how is the process for determining, let's say this new entity, chain signatures? Do you guys draw a stick? Do you express interest? Is there an interview process? Like, how do we transition into a much smaller, much focused entity with, if you have any insights around that? Or
yeah, so for the spinouts, it's largely like the people who are already working on that stuff, with a couple, that's most of it. For the rest of Pagoda, the thing that's been really, as you may have heard from the news in January, Near Foundation and Pagoda went through a round of layoffs at that point. Got a lot smaller, reduced scope in a lot of what they were doing. And for that, the focus was, let's keep the best people we can keep. Even if we have somebody who's really great, but doing something that we feel doesn't matter anymore, we'll find a way to keep them and move them to something that does matter. And identify the best people that we have employed in the ecosystem and make sure that we've got them on the highest priority things. This time around, this is still, in a very literal and in some jurisdictions, legal sense, a layoff for people at Pagoda. But it hasn't been many of the people who are affected by this, who are coming out of this without a guarantee of full-time employment, are the best people at Pagoda, because they were operating these great services that were critical to the ecosystem and are now going to get decentralized out. So it's a very different, the decision-making process of the future of Pagoda is not so much about criticality. In fact, sometimes it's even the inverse of that. It's about making sure that the people who are familiar with the people who are already basically part of this weird sub-department within a bunch of different organizations stick together as a team, and that the rest of people are taken care of as best as possible, even though they're fantastic.
These may be probably offensive to some people, and I'm not suggesting it as a solution or an alternative. I just think it'd be cool if we could do it. It'd be amazing to have as many Pagoda current employees, whether they stay or they are in a state of limbo, participate in the redacted hackathon, because it could be like a little experiment to go from literally the back, not the back door, from the back room, whatever I'm trying to say, to starting to play around. And it's going to be an 8-week thing. We're going to have 1 week in Chiang Mai in October, 1 month. I think it would be great to get them on ideation mode, And I think we could probably unlock, even if it's just like a bunch of ideas, mentor people, put them out there. There could be some teams forming around it or some new verticals being created. Would that be something that would be within scope over the next couple months, or is everyone super busy wrapping things up? And
No, it's a fantastic idea. And it's something I've been trying to, like, Pagoda had an offsite planned in like outside New York City next month. And so we're keeping that around and using it more of a hacker house. If you're one of the people affected by the Pagoda decentralization and restructuring, come work with your colleagues, figure out what the ecosystem needs and ideate on startup ideas, hack something together, use that time wisely, sign up for incubators. But yeah, I think the Redacted Hackathon is totally in line with that. I'll certainly pitch it to the team that's affected. I'd be absolutely delighted if out of the remains of Pagoda come 5 or 6 new great ideas working on their own things, whether that's things Pagoda used to work on or totally new ideas. At the end of the day, I'm not expecting that because we're putting people through a lot of changes in their personal lives and their professional lives. But I would be absolutely delighted if let's just 39 people that don't have a full-time home in the future of Pagoda stay in the new ecosystem and start 5 or 6 or 39 companies.
let's make Pagoda the new PayPal mafia.
Yeah,
The
that's the
Pagoda
idea.
mafia. Okay. I'll smash through a couple of these because I do want to get your thoughts on AI and the future of the world in general. But from the open source libraries, these open source libraries and tools will be developed by Pagoda until they reach a logical completion or stopping point. Meta transactions, chain hosted UI. Is that the boss?
So it's like version 3. There's the boss components on dev.near.org that are the underlying architecture that is it's just not as sound. It's not really sound enough to be relied on going forward. It's really cool. It's fun to use, but you can't really bring in other components from other developers in a trusted way that we rely on going forward. There was an attempt to build sort of a V2 that would solve those security challenges. But as we hit alpha testing on that with a group of people who were big users of V1, we realized it still had enough. It was still, in order to get that functionality, you still had to make enough compromises to the developer experience that people weren't really going to bother. We didn't feel like it was going to have great traction. Version 3, this thing we put out there as an experiment, and people are welcome to use it as is. It's fully functional, or they can keep developing it in the future, is what we're calling chain hosted UI. Essentially, it's the simplest possible version of a decentralized web front end. You build your application however you like. You go put the code on the near blockchain, and you build a little simple server that sits between them that reads the data off the blockchain and sends it to your browser. So you get the benefits of decentralization for your front end, which is the big challenge we're trying to solve here, without the compromises that it takes to post a component up on dev.near.org.
So this is completely different then. So I could write my front end in Django and just host it on this mini server between me and the blockchain, and then it pulls it up. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's heavily inspired by both the Boss VM and the web engine stuff from Near Social and the Web 4 project that was, I'm blanking on who built Web 4. Was it Eugene or no? It's
Vlad.
Yeah.
West Coast Vlad.
Vlad Grishina. Yeah.
This is amazing. I think this could be productized because decentralized front ends, I don't know if you're keeping up with the world, but there's been a lot of uncertainty, turmoil in Venezuela. They disabled Twitter for 1 week because there was a lot of election craziness there. But in general, I think that censorship resistance and just long-term availability are going to become increasingly important, especially for Web3 products. I've never heard about this one. To be honest, I tapped out and ran away from the boss as soon as I could. So yeah, this one sounds really good. Looking at the GitHub now, and I'll give it more of a read. Do you know if there's any teams outside of Pagoda that are working on this, or has anyone implemented in a way that looks like a good final outcome?
The team that was building this really just put it out there a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure how many people have picked it up since then. I know there are a couple people who have been continuing to work on the decentralized front end space within Near. Wenderson Pines has been building, what's it called? Oh, I wish I'd written this down. Sorry, Wenderson. Been building a great Alum, I think it's called, which is additional tooling on decentralized front ends on Near. Very good stuff. So it's too early to tell how people have taken this and run with it, but I'm excited for people to do so.
I'm happy to give it more visibility. Even I'm thinking of ways this could be included as part of the resources for the hackathon so that if anybody wants to play around and experiment with it over the 8 weeks period, could be interesting. What I find hilarious is nobody reads documentation in Web3, but also so many products and things are just not very well documented at all. Not saying anything here, but I opened the specs for the Near API JS modularization and refactor. And in some ways, I love the engineering efficiency of it being literally a Telegram message that has been it's just being linked and embedded in there. Fuck it, we can't even copy paste it, just put it there. But in other ways, I'm actually really interested to know because I know that this also goes back a while. I was in Korea when it was announced, and it was funny because Ilya announced it. It was like a half-empty stage. It wasn't even his main talk. And I was streaming it, and then I tweeted, and it basically got big hours ahead of the official launch at an event in Canada. I think we had ETH Seoul and ETH whatever the fuck they had in Canada. Sorry, Canada. Anyway, the premise, the vision, the potential of onboarding all these JavaScript developers was obviously huge and very exciting. And I think over time, it just became less of a priority, and then not many people talked about it. Would you give us an overview of roughly where it was left off? What were some of the challenges? Especially with things that somebody who may want to take this and run with it, what should they focus on or take into account?
Yeah, great questions. Okay, there's two pieces of JavaScript tooling that are different, related, but also worth talking about separately. One of them is the ability to write a near smart contract in JavaScript instead of in Rust.
That's the SDK?
Yep, the SDK.
Okay, and that's the one that I was referring to. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that I think also could use a decent amount, like it's usable, but it could use a decent amount of work. And I think there's a sort of an effort within the DevHub DAO to get that going again. And then this is the Near API JavaScript, which is for application developers to use to interact with Near from their JavaScript applications, generally web apps or mobile apps. And so the project is like, we've gotten some negative feedback about how that API is designed and used, that sometimes the feedback takes the form of, this looks like code that was written by a Rust developer learning JavaScript instead of familiar to a JavaScript developer.
Wow. Accurate. Maybe.
So the Michael and Andy and Pavel, the team that have been working on this, have been getting feedback and saying, okay, what are the top APIs from other ecosystems use? What formats do they use? What's the documentation? What's worked? What hasn't worked? How is it different from what we've done? How do we maintain backwards compatibility? And how do we just make the next version of Near API JS so that people building applications, usually most applications on Near, are built in JavaScript. And so we want that to be a more pleasant experience for people. And that project had already started going within Pagoda. I wanted to make sure it reached a logical conclusion before we...
You may not believe this, but I am a user of the JavaScript. Wait, is that the CLI? No.
The CLI is the third thing. I think that has actually gone through a pretty decent change in the last couple months.
Because I know that the CLI, there's a Rust one, which apparently is really good and interactive and does a lot of cool things. And I've used the basic one. Lucky for me, I've just added like a sub account to my name, like super basic stuff. But I've used it. I think that would be the third JavaScript things. Still not the API. Okay. No, I'm vaguely placing things in my mind because there was a point in time where I was exploring no-code platforms. And my theory was if I could build like a really cool, simple front end with the buttons and stuff, can I just trigger transactions on the blockchain by clicking on the button? Obviously, this would assume that there is already a smart contract, but even things like an AstroDAO kind of thing, if you could match the methods to the button on the front end. And I can't remember what the outcome of the research was at the time. I think I would have had to deploy a node or something like that. But I've recently come back to that question through the AI agents. So there's a bunch of platforms now that you can automate and create agents. And I was thinking the same, if I create my little workflow on make.com or like N8N, goes through an LLM, summarizes, can I get it to make a swap on ref or trigger something somewhere? I think maybe Bita is working more in that direction, but they are more Web3 only native now. I don't know. There's just so much to learn now. Like, what do you do? How do you keep up with all this shit?
I wish I did. I don't. I every once in a while, I try to keep up with people who are keeping up with everything. For the first time in like years, I have like browser bookmarks of stuff I should take a look at later. Of interesting AI development stuff. But man, I haven't had the time. One thing I've been using a lot lately, as I've been personally, I've been doing a lot of just management of Pagoda, the organization, for a number of months. If you look at my GitHub profile, you get a little green dot for every time you write any code, it's fallen off a cliff. I'm trying to get that back a lot lately. And so I really started using tools like Crtitical, which you feed it a GitHub repo, and then you can ask it to be like, hey, can you just draw a diagram of how everything here works? And okay, how does this thing work? And I can just instead of bugging somebody on the project team, I can just have a conversation with an AI about how that code works and learn a lot about it. So I've been all over that stuff lately.
Does it work well for like Web3 code, near code? Because I'm going to fork some shit. I want to fork Berry Club or something.
Yeah, enough. There's also,
that's great feedback.
The ones that are there, Crtitical and Bloop.ai have both been like LLMs where you just ask them about a code base and it'll help you learn it.
This is going to be amazing. I'm going to check that out as soon as we finish here because I've been jealous for a while. I met the team at ETH Denver. We actually went to the mountain together. Super bizarre that they work for cookbook.dev, and I somehow ended up with Merge after a wild night. And it wasn't until like weeks afterwards that I actually went to check them out. But it's a really nice database of all these Ethereum libraries and code. And now they've got the Chef GPT, so you can actually interact with it as I go to all these ETH Global Hackathons. It's pretty cool to have examples to look at, to be able to prompt the databases. This is where I'd like to see more of that body of resources and work accumulating for Near because, yeah, it just makes such a big difference for the hackers. The other thing that came to mind when you showed me the chain, what's it called? The UI? The front-end UI?
Yeah.
Chain-hosted UI. I'm not sure if you're familiar with scaffold.eth.
No.
They basically package. They bundle a bunch of services together. But the thing that I find the coolest perhaps is it spins out a super basic front end so you can visualize what the smart contract is doing and you can have inputs, you can test it. It just saves time. It's literally like scaffolding. Absolutely. And what some of the smart sponsors have done at ETH Global is they build a version of Scaffold that already has all their shit in. So when you deploy, they've already been like, I was looking at some of the bounties and I was like, why do they have a bounty? They've literally done it all. You can just deploy everything. And anyway, it's good. I think that
cool.
If you're a hacker.
Yeah, that's sort of stuff we want to get on Near.
We started in New York. We get them on Redacted, and I think these teams have plenty of work ahead of them.
There we go. Ethereum has the benefit, the EVM, including L2 community, has the benefit of being so large that there's always people experimenting with things like Cookbook and Scaffold and trying to build new tooling. The way that we spin that into a benefit is just let them experiment and fail in 10 different ways, and then pick the best one and copy it for Near and improve on it a little bit. Second mover advantage can be an important thing in this space because it's really hard to make great tools.
Said. Eric, I'm mindful of your time. We're over 2 hours. I feel like we could go for another one easily. But if you had a magic wand and we could sort out the transition in the best way possible, where do you see yourself over the next 6 months? I think you've got more of an engineering bent. Maybe you also have a soft spot for like earlier stage startups. Then your ecosystem, lucky for everyone, is giving us a buffet of verticals and areas. Where would you like to be if all things go your way?
Currently, I'm penciling in myself to join the chain abstraction spinout, more of a still a leadership role, but a little bit more technical hands-on, hopefully. A little bit more of my wheelhouse for my career so far. And I think it's a really exciting set of stuff to build for the world.
If you want to participate in the hackathon, I'm looking for a team member and we can create an AI twin of myself so it's a familiar environment for you. And yeah, I'm excited to have you on.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for the every couple months pestering, and then I'm glad we made this happen. Have a good one.